it's going to start. Have you all got the same size dressing rooms now?
Yes.
That's okay.
Well, they're a little different, but...
Actually, I like yours.
Mine is a little different, but it's the same size.
Well, she had a desk, but I had one built in mine.
Remember when 4 Southern women could land sharper insults than most action heroes landed punches? Well, that was Designing Women, CBS's hit sitcom that ran from 1986 to 1993, set inside an Atlanta firm called Sugarbaker Associates. It followed 4 very different decorators. Julia Sugarbaker, played by Dixie Carter, her ex-beauty queen sister Suzanne, played by Delta Burke, sharp-tongued divorcee Mary Jo Shively, played by Annie Potts, and a sweet small-town Charlene Frazier, played by Jean Smart, with Meshach Taylor as Anthony, the delivery man who somehow kept the whole place sane. And today we're going to count down 15 weird facts about designing women. And stick around for number 1 because Dixie Carter, well, she stuck her own husband and daughters onto the show. And most fans, they never caught it. But before we start, hit like and subscribe to Remember When for more nostalgic TV deep dives. Now, I do declare, pour yourself some sweet tea and let's head back to Sugarbakers. Number 15, they took a vote. It wasn't close. For a show built on women who argued for a living, the ugliest fight happened when the cameras were off. By the early 90s, Designing Women was a top CBS hit, and backstage, it was falling apart, with Delta Burke at the center. Around 1989, her weight became a media obsession. Off-camera, Burke claimed that creators Linda Bloodworth-Thomason and Henry Thomason psychologically abused her and pressured the cast to stay thin. The producers disputed it, but then it went public. On November 14th of 1990, Burke aired her grievances on a Barbara Walters special without warning the producers, accusing the Thomasons of harassment and claiming executives blocked the doors to keep the cast on set during 15-hour days. The fallout got personal. Dixie Carter, the matron of honor at Burke's wedding, sided with the producers, and the friendship went cold for over a decade. Burke missed so much work that the crew kept 2 scripts ready. One with Suzanne and one without. By season 5, it got toxic. Burke filmed her final scenes and then left. The cast and producers then voted not to bring her back, and she got released from her contract. Finally, in 95, Burke and Bloodworth-Thomason made peace, and she returned as Suzanne in the spin-off Women of the House. She and Carter reconciled too, reuniting on Family Law in 2002. Even some of television's messiest feuds eventually cool down. Number 14, 50,000 angry letters later, and CBS finally caved. These days, a show in trouble gets a hashtag, but in the 80s, fans, they grabbed the pen. And Designing Women pulled off one of the great rescue missions in really all of sitcom history. During its first season, the show wasn't dying for a lack of fans. The problem was CBS. The network kept shuffling it around the schedule like a game of TV roulette, dumping it into weak Sunday and Thursday slots where the ratings sank. By spring of 1987, CBS was ready to cancel it. But then, the fans got loud. Producer Harry Thompson showed up with Dorothy Swanson, who founded the advocacy group Viewers for Quality Television, and her members rallied through the group's newsletter and mailing lists, pointing every fan straight at CBS Entertainment President Bud Grant. The letters came in by the hundreds, and then the thousands, and then eventually more than 50,000 of them, everyone needing a stamp, an envelope, and somebody who actually sat down to write. The mailbags reportedly piled up in the halls, and as the lore goes, Grant's secretary threatened to quit over the sorting. It worked. Stunned that anyone cared this much about a freshman sitcom, CBS reversed course, renewed the show, and then moved it back to Mondays, where it ran for 7 seasons as the staple of the network's comedy lineup. 50,000 fans basically told CBS, bless your heart, you are not canceling our show. Number 13, Dolly Parton? Well, she crashed the party on purpose. Booking a big celebrity for your sitcom is one thing, but having one call because she's a fan? That's another. And that's exactly how Designing Women landed Dolly Parton. By the end of the 80s, the show was a hit, and as the press releases told it, Parton herself asked to be on it, simply because she loved it. Which tracks, because Designing Women and Dolly, they're basically speaking the same language. Southern to the bone, equal parts humor and heart, and firm believers that big hair, that counts as a personality trait. So on January 1st of 1990, she turned up in a special hour-long episode with a title that needed its own zip code. The first day of the last decade of the entire 20th century. A heavily pregnant Charlene, played by Jean Smart, drifts off and dreams that her lifelong idol appears as a kind of guardian movie star. It barely counted as stunt casting. Charlene was the sweet, starstruck one who'd have fainted at the real thing, so handing her the actual Dolly just made the dream literal. Soon after, she goes into labor, with baby Olivia in the running to be the first child born in the new decade. It became one of the show's more memorable guest spots. Sentimental, funny, and just over the top enough to be pure designing women. Given a cast of strong Southern women, quick wit, and enough hairspray to trigger weather warnings, the only real surprise is that Dolly just stopped by once. Number 12. Anthony was hired to vanish after just a single delivery. Some TV characters spend years clawing their way to being a fan favorite, but Anthony Bouvier, he did it in a single episode. When Meshach Taylor turned up in season 1, Anthony was nothing but a delivery man, a small functional part with no plan behind it. You drop off a package, say a couple lines, disappear. But then Taylor actually got on set, and the producers had a very good problem. His charm and timing, well, that clicked with the 4 women instantly. And instead of just being a guest passing through, Anthony felt like he had worked at Sugarbaker's for years. So they kept him. The one-off became recurring. The recurring kept growing, and by season 3, Taylor was in the opening credits as a full series regular. Fans loved him, critics loved him, and in 1989, the industry made it official. An Emmy nomination for Outstanding Supporting Actor. The writers thought that they hired a delivery man, but what walked through the door was one of the most beloved characters on the entire series. Number 11. The TV show set doubled as a matchmaker. Now, designing women was supposed to be about decorating rooms, but it quietly became one of Hollywood's better matchmaking services, and it handed 2 of its stars lasting marriages. Let's start with Jean Smart. Early on, Richard Gilliland joined as J.D. Shackelford, Mary Jo's boyfriend on the show. The role was paired with Annie Potts' character, but off-camera, it was Smart who noticed him. Wanting intel before making a move, she sent Delta Burke to find out if he was single, and Burke handled it with all the subtlety of a Julia Sugarbaker monologue. She walked up and flat out asked. Then, Smart lured Gilliland into her dressing room on the pretense of needing help with a crossword puzzle. Possibly the most charming move ever pulled on a soundstage, and it worked. They married in 1987, and they stayed together for nearly 34 years until his death in 2021. Burke's story moved faster. She and Gerald McCraney first crossed paths at an award luncheon, but the romance caught fire when he guested in season 2 as Dash Goff, Suzanne's smooth-talking ex-husband. He asked her out during the shoot, and by date 2, he'd proposed. Some people take longer choosing an Applebee's. I know I do, but these 2, they were in a hurry. They married in 1989 and have been together ever since. Oh, and one more twist. McCraney beat out John Ritter for the role of Dash Goff. Had Ritter landed it, one of TV's most devoted couples may never have happened. Proof that the show's best love stories weren't even in the script. Number 10. Dixie Carter negotiated the strangest contract clause in all of TV. Julia Sugarbaker could level a room with nothing but a stare and 3 minutes of uninterrupted talking. Her speeches were such a trademark that the show nicknamed her the Terminator. Well, the catch was that Dixie Carter didn't always agree with a word coming out of her own mouth. Off-screen, Carter was a conservative Republican with a little libertarian streak. But Julia is a fierce finger-pointing liberal. So delivering one of those 5-minute monologues sometimes meant arguing the side that Carter would have argued against at her own dinner table. Instead of fighting creator Linda Bloodworth-Thomason over it, Carter, she cut a deal. For every big political speech that she gave that she personally disagreed with, the producers would write her an episode where she got to sing. Speech for a song. It's the only sitcom contract clause that sounds like it was haggled by a Broadway agent. And it paid off in both ways. Fans got Julia show-stopping takedowns, and Carter, she got to show off her real singing voice on hymns, show tunes, jazz standards that most viewers never knew that she had. And it all held together on respect. Despite the political gulf, Carter and Bloodworth-Thomason got along fine for 7 seasons. Carter always said that the friendship ran deeper than politics. And for 7 seasons, it did. That's rarer than a sitcom theme song, and what a great lesson in general. Number 9. Annie Potts spent a whole season hiding a real pregnancy. One of TV's oldest traditions is pretending that nobody can tell that an actress is pregnant. Designing women, they played that game more than once and handled it in 2 completely different ways. The first one, that was easy. Jean Smart found out that she was pregnant the same night that she filmed Charlene's wedding to Air Force Colonel Bill Stillfield. Since Charlene was now a married woman, the writers simply wrote the pregnancy in. It carried through season 4, and it paid off in that hour-long New Year's 1990 episode where, again after that Dolly Parton dream, Charlene delivers baby Olivia. One of those times where real life and the script kind of line up perfectly. A couple of years later, they didn't bother. When Annie Potts got pregnant in season 6, the producers chose not to write it in. Reportedly because Murphy Brown, airing right before them on Mondays, was already running the most talked-about pregnancy on television, and nobody wanted to look like the copycats next door. So they hid it. Out came the usual arsenal. Desks to stand behind, roomy sweaters, oversized purses, and floral arrangements that practically had their own contracts. The irony was perfect. Over on Murphy Brown, A not pregnant Candice Bergen was padded to look at, while a genuinely pregnant Potts spent the season trying not to. Once you know, you can't really unsee it. Nothing attracts a giant potted plant faster than a sitcom pregnancy. Number 8. Sugarbaker's Atlanta mansion was actually sitting in Arkansas all along. Now, if you watch Designing Women, you probably remember that gorgeous Victorian mansion in the opening credits. Yeah, that's not Atlanta. It's not even in Georgia. The exterior of Sugarbaker Associates was actually Via Marre, a real mansion sitting hundreds of miles from the show's fictional Atlanta, in the historic Quapaw quarter of Little Rock, Arkansas. It was built in 1881 by Angelo Marre, an Italian immigrant and a saloon keeper. It's a rare blend of Second Empire and Italianate styles.
Welcome back to the Quapaw Quarter, and welcome to the Villa Marie, built in 1882 by Angelo and Jeannie Marie.
It looks like it should come with its own orchestral theme. Long before Hollywood, it was already a local landmark, and it landed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1970. Then, Designing Women put it in living rooms across America every week, and the place became an accidental tourist attraction. Fans would make pilgrimages to Little Rock just to stand in front of it. And before long, plenty of people stopped calling it Villa Marre at all. It was simply the Designing Women house. Now, over the decades, it wore a lot of hats. A private residence, headquarters for a local historical association, a wedding venue. But to fans, it's always going to be Sugarbaker's. Not many houses get fan mail. This one practically joined the cast. Hey, quick pause. If you're enjoying the countdown, be sure to take a second to hit like and subscribe. And drop a comment. Who's your favorite of the gang? Was it Julia, Suzanne, Mary Jo, Charlene, or maybe for a little razzle-dazzle, maybe it's Anthony? All right, let's get back to the countdown. Number 7, Dixie Carter told the world about her plastic surgery. Now, Hollywood always wanted its actresses to age gracefully and never look a day older while doing it. Two things that obviously don't go together. Now, Dixie Carter refused to play that game, or at least quietly. Around the time that Designing Women got rolling, Carter did the thing that most actors dread. She watched herself on TV, and she didn't love what she saw. She was 47 when the show premiered in 1986, and after those early episodes, she decided to get a little work done. Most stars would have buried that secret, but Carter, she talked about it openly. She even had a preferred term for it. She called it aesthetic surgery, not plastic surgery, right? And she wrote about going under the knife without a flicker of embarrassment in her 1996 memoir, Trying to Get to Heaven, Opinions of a Tennessee Talker. And she wasn't apologizing for it either. Carter happily owned the choice at a time when the unspoken rule was to deny it forever. She cheerfully cast herself as a fan of the scalpel. Only Dixie Carter can make plastic surgery sound like joining a book club. In an industry built on managed images, that kind of candor stood out. It might have been more surprising than the actual surgery itself. Number 6, Delta Burke asked them to write her the most painful episode. By the late 80s, Delta Burke was getting a brutal real-life version of Suzanne's storyline. As the show took off, tabloids fixated on her weight, running stories that pulled almost as much attention as the series itself. Designing Women rarely ignored something staring it down, so it built an episode around exactly that. The result, airing December 11th of 1989, was they shoot fat women, don't they? Suzanne heads to her high school reunion expecting a hero's welcome, but instead catches her old classmates mocking her weight behind her back. Anyone who's ever walked into a reunion wondering if people would recognize them knows that particular dread, and this turns it up to 11. The origin is its own little mystery. By several accounts, Burke wanted the show to confront the scrutiny that she was living through. Others involved later disagreed about whose idea it really was. What nobody argues is the payoff. Instead of fixing everything with a makeover montage, the writers gave Suzanne the floor. Accepting an award at the reunion, she names the hurt out loud. Then, she admits the old Suzanne would have slimmed down and gotten even, and decides that she's done being that person. It really lands on self-acceptance instead of revenge. It's one of the most honest moments that the show ever pulled off, and it earned Burke her first Emmy nomination for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Comedy Series in 1990. Number 5, nobody knew the finale was the finale, so it never said goodbye. After 7 seasons of feuds, romances, and financial disasters, you'd expect a tearful Sugarbaker send-off, but instead, the lady spent the finale pretending to be Scarlett O'Hara. Gone with a Whim aired on May 24th of 1993, and the catch is that it was never built as a goodbye. Ratings had cratered after Season 7 moved to Fridays, so CBS pulled the plug, and a 2-part episode that plays like any other became the series' final word almost by accident. The plot has Sugarbaker's broke again, with BJ Poteet landing the women a job redecorating a mansion that was built to look like the great house from Gone with the Wind. super Southern, right? From there, reality clocks out, and the back half turns into an extended fantasy with each woman picturing herself as Scarlett, while the gang fends off a hostile takeover of the film. They win, the business survives, and life just kind of rolls on. For fans who'd spent 7 years with these characters, it was like showing up to a retirement party and finding a costume contest. The finale's still debated. Fans just never got their goodbye. Then again, maybe that fits. The lights just stayed on. And somewhere in Atlanta, the arguing presumably continues. Number 4. For years, fans were watching a secretly chopped up version. Now, a lot of Designing Women's fans spent years rewatching the show without realizing that they weren't seeing all of it. If you caught the series in syndication through the 90s and 2000s, you were almost certainly watching a trimmed-down version of what actually aired on CBS, and not by a couple of seconds either. Entire scenes, jokes, and even small character beats quietly vanished. The reason? Commercials. Always commercials, right? The original episodes ran about 23 to 24 minutes. As stations demanded more ad time, syndicators sliced 2 to 4 minutes out of nearly every episode. On an action show, you might lose a car chase, but here, you lose dialogue. And dialogue is the whole point. It was death by 1,000 tiny edits, picking off side plots, transitions, and smaller punchlines that made these people feel real. The most visible casualty was the original Season 1 and 2 opening, which syndication swapped for the later, more familiar title sequence. It now only survives on DVDs. Some of the raunchier jokes got trimmed too. Julia could flatten hypocrisy, bad manners, and anyone who underestimated her, but she was no match for a syndication editor and a stopwatch. The fix came on home video, when Shout Factory's DVD sets restored the uncut episodes. Streaming took longer, so if you revisit the show and think, wait a minute, I don't remember this, well, you're not imagining it. You're finally seeing the version that Julia intended, minus a couple of detergent commercials. Number 3, the Sugarbaker women were real people who raised the creator. For Linda Bloodworth-Thomason, Designing Women was less a sitcom than a love letter to the women she grew up around, learned from, and occasionally tried very hard not to argue with. The Southern women that she knew, they weren't shrinking violets. They were forces of nature. She came up in Poplar Bluff, Missouri, an attorney's daughter who planned to follow her father into law, until a trip to LA, that rerouted her for good. And I'm talking Los Angeles, not Louisiana. She taught high school English out there, and then she turned to writing. And by the time she hit Hollywood, she was tired of seeing Southerners written as just slow, simple punchlines. Because the women in her life were sharp, outspoken, and impossible to outtalk before breakfast. Julia, Suzanne, Mary Jo, and Charlene, they weren't copies of real people. They were built from the personalities that she grew up with. The wit, fierce opinions, the way that they could go from beauty pageants to religion to a questionable casserole, all in one breath. That's why the show never sounded like anything else. People on Designing Women performed more than they chatted. Like everyone was a beat from standing up in church to make a point. The art of destroying someone while smiling came straight from her world, shaped by her mother Claudia and the women in her family. She cared so much that she wrote the first 35 episodes herself. The whole first season and part of season 2, a record in TV history. One voice, one world, and she just let him talk. Number 2, the show's bravest episode came from one cruel hospital remark. Designing Women never shied away from hard subjects, but its bravest episode didn't come from a writer's room. It came from a hospital hallway. Around 1986, creator Linda Bloodworth-Thomason was sitting with her mother Claudia, who was dying of AIDS after contracting it from a contaminated blood transfusion during a surgery. Now, at the time, fear and misinformation were everywhere, and AIDS patients were often met with as much cruelty as care. Bloodworth-Thomason watched it happen up close. Then, walking the halls one day, she overheard a woman say that the disease had one thing going for it. It was killing all the right people. The remark stayed with her. Instead of letting it die in that hallway, she built an episode around it. She put the words in the mouth of a bigoted character and made them the title. Killing All the Right People aired on October 5th of 1987, following the Sugarbaker women as they help a designer, Kendall Dobbs, who is dying of AIDS, stand up to the prejudice surrounding him. It was one of the first primetime episodes to tackle the AIDS crisis head on, at a moment when most of television was still pretending that the subject didn't exist. The episode became one of the most acclaimed of the entire run and earned Bloodworth-Thomason an Emmy nomination for Outstanding Writing. And number 1, Dixie Carter quietly cast her own husband and daughters. Now, most actors are content just to get along with their co-stars, but Dixie Carter, she went further and started bringing relatives to work. Over the years, Designing Women quietly turned into a bit of a family business for her, with both her husband and her daughters turning up on screen. The headliner was Holbrook. Long before he played Julia's love interest, he was already Carter's husband in real life. The two married in 1984. On the show, he played Reese Watson, a distinguished Atlanta attorney, and Julia's great romance. Most TV couples need you to pretend that they've got chemistry, but this one, it came pre-installed. Because the actors had already done the marriage part. Fans adored Reese, which made it sting when the character got written off after dying off-screen in Season 5. But Holbrook wasn't the only one. In the Season 3 episode, The Naked Truth, Julia and Suzanne's visiting nieces, Camilla and Jennifer, were played by Carter's real daughters, Jenna and Marre Dixie Carter, which made the family resemblance very easy to buy. The episode's main plot, naturally, sent Mary Jo, Charlene, and Anthony off to decorate a client's home that turned out to be a nudist colony, because no job on this show was ever that simple. For a couple episodes, designing women stopped being a workplace and became a family reunion with cameras. And there you have it, everyone. 15 weird and wild facts about designing women. Which one hit you the hardest? Which one surprised you the most? Well, drop it in the comments and share this with a friend who still quotes Julia Sugarbaker. Until next time, bless your heart. This is Remember When.